CM8, or Crowd Media Limited, just moved up 40% this morning, and we're about an hour and a half into trade. And the announcement came out 20 minutes after market open, and the headline is CM8 achieves significant financial turnaround. So let's have a look at the document. The announcement says that they have had substantial losses for the last 2 financial years, and that they've now recorded a near break-even position at the underlying EBITDA level for the first half of financial year 2020 compared to the first half of 2019. Now, real quick, for those of you who don't know what EBITDA stands for, here are some definitions. We've got NPAT, EBIT, EBITDA, or EBITDA. I've always said EBITDA. Anyway, it stands for earnings before interest, tax, dividends, and amortization. And for those of you who don't know what amortization is just a way of spreading out payments throughout multiple financial periods. So EBITDA is effectively just another way of saying net revenue. So their company is talking about net revenues. And the interesting part is this part here, underlying EBITDA. Underlying is basically the company's way of saying we've got another way of fiddling with the numbers to make it look good. Now here's the really sneaky part. The company mentions that they have 8.5 million in revenue, and they've made a small loss of 36k in underlying EBITDA. That compares to the same time the previous financial year, where they made a loss of 1.3 million. So they're saying, look, our position's gone better by $1.27 million roughly. Their financial situation has improved. But that's not the case. We don't see the revenues from last year. We only see the revenues from this year in the first half of the financial year. And this is why it's so sneaky. If we look at the annual report, what are their revenues for 2019? $23 million. What are the revenues for half one of 2020? 8.5 million. If we times that by 2, they're going to be at 17 million revenue compared to 23 million. And the year before that, they were on 38 million revenue. Their revenues are in significant decline. They dropped 38% between 2018 and 2019. Now, I can't find the half one and half two financial numbers, but I'm going to assume that they're relatively similar to each other. Now, this is all with the assumption that half one numbers and half two numbers are going to be very similar. Is half one going to be 8.5 million in revenue and half two could be 15 million in revenue? I don't know. I don't know what half one and half two of 2019 looked like, but I assume it was about half and half. It's just a reasonable assumption to make. If we scroll down, we can also see the EBITDA and the underlying EBITDA and the kind of clever accounting that the company chooses to do. Now, I don't typically see underlying EBITDA in other financial documents, so this is kind of strange for me. This is a bit different. Underlying EBITDA is where a company chooses to calculate internally to show what it believes is a more accurate financial reporting. So EBITDA, this is what is required from the company from the ASX perspective. This is what they're going to report as their financial figures. And this is what they're choosing to report. And these are like, hey, look at our alternative numbers. Now, there's a huge difference between a loss of $23 million in EBITDA and, of course, a positive $3.5 million in EBITDA. One of these is a reporting requirement by the ASX, and one of these is internal company figures. Now let's look at the net profit after tax from the 2019 and 2018 financial years. Now, net profit after tax is simply the EBITDA and then take away the A, D, T, and I. So you've simply just got the earnings once you deduct all the other factors here. We end up with a loss of 26 million compared to a almost $5 million loss in 2019. And one would look at this and go, yeah, look, the financial position is growing fantastically. Look at the difference here. That's a $22 million gain. But let's look at how that gain was actually achieved. So we can see here in the financial report for 2018, we have a gross profit of nearly $30 million in 2018, and then half of that in 2019. We actually end up with half profit and significantly declining sales, or in other words, revenue. When we scroll down, we got to wonder, well, if they had so much profit, where's it all going? It's going here. This is the single biggest loss or written down loss in the financial statement. Impairment of intangibles. Now, I was going to go through the definition of intangibles, And it really is quite simply, so your tangibles are your money, cars, buildings, stocks, your equipment, machinery. Your intangibles are things like your trademarks, your data, your software, your copyright and patents. And it's all defined here on page 35. Now, sorry about the kookaburras in the background. I can't really shut them up. So in section 35, we can see... Where is it? Intangible assets. So is basically anything other than goodwill. So it's intellectual property, distribution networks, software, and databases. And then of course there are some other definitions here. So the non-tangible asset is being written down as devalued, basically. So really that's where we get this significant loss here. And that's why the position of the company looks relatively healthy from year to year. But if you look at the actual numbers, if you take the 30 seconds to really just look into where these massive losses come from, you find out that these are just write-downs. And the company position, really, if you look at the revenues and if you look at the profit, you can see exactly which direction this company is heading. And we've already got an indication in half one of 2020 that they're only meeting $8.5 million in revenue. I can only assume, and I could always go back and have a look and do some research, but I'm assuming 24 divided by 2. I'm going to assume that half one of 2019 was $12 million revenue and that they're sitting at 8.5 now. But this is just an assumption, but I think it's quite a fair assumption to make. So be careful when it comes to this company's financial reporting. It all sort of stinks a little bit. Just real quick guys, as I was compiling this video, I found the half one results of 2019. That had revenues of $14 million. So if we compare that to the half one revenues of 2020, which is $8.5 million, you can see exactly why this announcement did not mention the comparison between half one 2020 and half one 2019, because it makes it look terrible. So they're trying to put a positive spin on an announcement that really shouldn't be that good.